Hello everyone, Mike here from Real Steel Productions, coming to you from beautiful Jeju Island, South Korea. With the announcement a few months ago of the Canon EOS R5C, the internet has been alight, or at least the camera portion of the internet has been alight, with thoughts and opinions on this new camera, where it fits into Canon's lineup, who it's for, and I've decided, more or less, 90% there, that I'm going to purchase it. And if I do go ahead, it will be the first DSLR I have bought new ever since my first DSLR, which is the Canon EOS 40D, bought back in 2008. So I am a little excited. Oh no, wait, I just got this one here. And then recently in 2019 was the EOS R. And so I've been in the Canon ecosystem ever since then for a variety of reasons, mostly to do with the handling. In fact, handling, menus, ergonomics, Canon color, sure, people like to go on about that, but really in this day and age, if you can't get a good photo and a good video out of any, or almost any mirrorless camera or new modern camera that's out there, well, you're doing something wrong. And myself, I use professionally the R5, the C200, and the 1DC on projects, although I do use this by far the least these days. And so I thought I'd add my own opinions to the mix since I'm likely going to be making the purchase of the R5C. So before we get too deep into things here, keep in mind that the R5C joins this growing list of mirrorless cameras that essentially are offering the best of both worlds, more or less. There really aren't too many jobs you wouldn't be able to do with whatever's being offered out there. Previously with the R5, even with the A7S III, with the S1H, even with the cameras that aren't primarily intended as video cameras. So, I mean, an R6, an S1. All of these are brilliant tools that should be able to get the job done in 90% of circumstances. But the reason we're here and the reason we're throwing our thoughts around about the R5C is that it is special. It is a little different, and it is offering some things that the other mirrorless cameras aren't offering. Even more so than, say, the EOS R or the R5 or any other mirrorless camera to date. The R5C is providing more quote-unquote professional tools on both the photo and video side. But we do have to keep in mind that all of this is coming in a very small package, and people like to really harp on the video features, but the reality of the situation is that Canon or whichever manufacturer needs to make sure these are still ergonomic photo tools. So inevitably, sacrifices have been made somewhere. The R5C, who's it for? Two people, I think, more or less. Someone who needs a high-resolution stills camera and a quote-unquote pro video camera. And again, as we just mentioned, some of the features that we take for granted as pros aren't present in the R5C or really any mirrorless camera because it would hurt the camera's photo ergonomics. It's not going to happen. And then secondly, you're someone who, for whatever reason, needs 8K 60 or 30 without fuss, without issue, in a small package. So my thought is that if you're in the Canon ecosystem and you're looking for a stills camera, well, get the R5. And if you want a step up video camera, get the C70. But personally, myself, I do need a stills camera as well. This will get sold. It's been good and I enjoy using it mostly, but I'm looking for something that will provide more, really more professional video options. Having 45 megapixels, do I need it? No, but it's there. Yeah, and it is useful for cropping and this and that. Sometimes it has its uses, even for people not doing, high resolution studio stuff. Image quality wise, yeah, for the stuff I do, it all ends up on social media. It's viewed on the internet. I'm not making big prints. For what I do, it's wildly sufficient. The only thing that irks me video-wise is the giant crop in 4K. Apart from that, this camera gets a lot of, it's got some wasted space on it. The touch bar here is nonsense. I've never figured out a way to properly use that, and so I've just got it disabled, and now that's wasted space on the body there. Something that I don't like is if I'm shooting from the hip, if I'm shooting low like this, it's really awkward for me to get down there with the thumb and hit this four-way rocker button. And that's something that I quite enjoy with the 1DC, which for me is just a beautiful body to hold. It feels great, and this is the camera I really most enjoy shooting stills with. Of course, it's lacking a myriad of other things like eye autofocus, which I can't live without now, especially if I'm shooting with the 85-1.2 or the 200-1.8 here. But having to do the autofocus micro adjustment on this camera, you still don't get the results that you get with this. Really, it breathes new life into those lenses. So what am I rambling on about now? I can't change the focus points quickly enough going back and forth with this. Having the touch capable screen here when it's up to your eye and being able to quickly navigate things with your thumb is, I mean, I haven't used, say, what is it, that sexy little nipple that exists on the 1DX3 and the R3, I think. But I mean, this for me, that having that touch is the next best thing. If I do get the R5C, it will, or sometime down the road, I will get the battery grip. If not only to help alleviate some of the power issues, but also to just make it more comfortable to hold. Without the grip on it, it's just a small little fiddly body. Like it's smaller than the 40D back in the day. It's almost like holding one of the Rebels. And still, even compared to that gripped, the 1DC just has a more solid feel. It just fits my hand so nicely. And so really that's something I wouldn't want to give up. So the R5C would get gripped anyways. In order to try and figure out kind of where Canon is coming from with the R5C, now we do kind of have to go back to the 1DC released 10 years ago, way back in 2012, because this back then was the first camera of its kind. A 4K DSLR in this form factor, you know, Canon taking a existing camera in their lineup, essentially just rebadging it. And this is what we ended up with. And it did change the landscape a bit, and there was a lot of criticism levied against the camera for very good reasons, but it did do a lot of stuff well, and it still is a very viable tool these days, and I plan on keeping this as a backup just because it's very chunky and nice to hold, and I enjoy using it. So let's do a comparison then against the R5C and the 1DC, just to see kind of how the landscape has changed and to see what Canon has learned over the course of 10 years, essentially. Have they looked at some of the criticism levied against this 10 years ago, and have they applied some of those lessons then to the R5C? So way back in 2012, the 1DC had a beautiful 4K image. It had Canon log. It had a Super 35 1080p mode that was noticeably sharper than the full-frame 1080p mode. It also had 1080p 60, which was soft and mushy as anything. No 30-minute time limit, which is something that Canon has only recently done away with the R3. It had a, for the time, small form factor, being the first 4K DSLR ever. And it also was a top-of-the-line photo camera, of course, being based on a Canon 1DX. And so yeah, that is a fairly short list of added options there. There was actually also I believe they took out the flash sync port and added a headphone jack. There are some changes made to the inside of the body, firmware, of course, being one, some reworked circuitry here and there. And maybe, I feel like years ago I came across a teardown of one of these, but I think it has been established that there was indeed a larger heatsink put in here. So yeah, Canon did learn a bit there, and that they've added much more to the R5C video-wise than was on the R5. So something that's worth noting is that when Canon does these rebadges and adds this sexy, sultry C, they don't set out to make a completely different camera. They take something that's existing within the lineup and then they modify it. Something that already has strong video features, or I guess the potential for strong video features. I mean, this did have 1080p 30 back in the day as a 1DX. So when, again, to come back to the photo ergonomic thing, when you get a lot of criticism levied against this and saying, why didn't they do X, Y, and Z? Well, it's because it's got to maintain its functionality as a photo tool. If they do too much to push it towards video, then it's just a C70. So for the bad now, here are some of the criticisms that were levied against the 1DC back when it was released. As we just mentioned, it was expensive. It was a huge markup over the 1DX. Huge data rates as well, 500 megabit per second motion JPEG codec. 500 megabits per second is 62.5 megabytes per second. And this did require, for the day, fairly expensive and large CF cards. If you even wanted to break the 30-minute record limit that was still inherent on other DSLRs back then, you needed at least a 128 gigabyte CF card, and those were fairly expensive 8, 9, 10 years ago. It doesn't have 4K 30, which is something that someone like me would appreciate. Now, I'd like to be able to use it more for broadcast work. In fact, when it first launched, it launched with only 4K 24. It didn't even have 4K 25 for the PAL market. That was something that was added later via firmware. And again, no real video options added. It had that headphone monitoring jack, the 4K, and then the Super 35 modes. No zebras, no waveforms, no peaking, nothing else added for video. And the reason that Canon gave for that was, in their eyes, this was a camera kind of meant to be rigged up and used with a few people. It wasn't really intended by Canon as a single operator camera, which seems ridiculous because obviously the form factor lends itself to that beautifully.